And Sasha also is a wonderful speaker, a founder. You've been kind of all over the place in all kinds of different things. Sasha also came on my podcast. I highly recommend this keynote. It's going to be awesome. Enjoy. Failing to learn versus learning to fail.
Thank you, Laura. Hi, everybody. How are you doing this morning? So this talk was a passion project. So if you're a speaker, you know that a lot of talks that you write are encouraged by your employer in some way, right? Because at the very least, you want the employer to give you time to go give the talk or, like, you know, sponsor your travel or whatever. This one, no one asked me to write. I wrote it because it had a huge impact on me, and then I thought it could help people, right? So I'm talking from the heart here. And this is me. I've worked at some places. I have studied in some universities. The big picture is from DevOpsDays Chicago with the DevOps Yak. I've been involved in organizing DevOpsDays Chicago for about 10 years, so I'm part of this community as well. I've done some DevOps product sales, whatever, lots of things. I guess I get bored and hop at different departments in technology. And I started a couple of years ago, I started this business with these intelligent humans. You know at least one of them, Andrew Clay Schaefer. He spoke here in Texas probably more than once. They're pretty amazing. I learn every day from them. Before I get into it, I want to ask you a couple questions. So how much do you agree with the statements? You can learn new things, but you can't really change how intelligent you are. So from 0 to 100, how much do you agree? Like, shout a number if you want. 0. Anybody thinks that you can't change your intelligence?
Yes.
Okay. There's always some people, like, I mean, maybe you anticipate the answer, but it's okay to be anywhere on this spectrum. Second question, do you call yourself lazy? Do you ever call? Yes. Lots of people. All right. Okay. So we're going to talk about this. So this slide is intentionally blank. I keep learning about learning. I keep discovering new insights. So there's like lots of things that went into this talk. There's one specific book that is a core, but there's a lot of other things. One of the insights I discovered probably a year ago or so is we cannot teach another person directly. We can only facilitate learning. This kind of blew my mind. This comes from Carl Rogers, who's a father of American positive psychology, like really cool stuff that he researched. But basically it says, like, any major insight you have to discover for yourself. Like, I can't impart knowledge on you. I can only facilitate learning, so I can, like, maybe give you resources and stuff like that, but not. This is why you can read the same book multiple times and read it differently, discover new things in the book. This is why most of cliches are cliches, because they're really good, truthful sayings, but you're not ready to hear them, so they mean nothing to you until they do mean something. So that's kind of the learning experience. So if I can't teach you, why am I on stage speaking? Begs the question. The answer to this is when the student is ready, the teacher will appear. So I've prepared, and at the end of this talk, there's a slide with this QR code, and it just like links you to the resources. This is a non-exhaustive list of things that went into this talk. But you don't have to read them all. You can if you want to. They're all very interesting. This is books and research papers and all sorts of things. So I am talking about my perception of all of this stuff, and I am giving you the ability to dive in more when you're ready to learn this. So before I dive into studies, because studies are dry and maybe uninteresting, I'm going to tell a personal story. So as a child, I was a bookworm. I spent my years just reading books. I was interested in everything. I would be interested in physics one day, and then literature the other day, and then, I don't know, something else next day. Learning was like a core part of my personality, probably. So then, yada, yada, I go all the way to university. I went to a very technical university. I enrolled in biology, and because I wanted to study genetics, after one semester of growing fruit flies, I decided that I don't want to spend my career in biology. Seemed very, like, we literally grew worms, fruit flies, and yeast. And I'm like, not cool. So I looked around and I decided to transfer to computer science. And I discovered this was a really good choice because computers are really awesome and much more fun to play with than fruit flies. But so this was my grade average in biology. This is roughly an A grade average. It's 94 out of 100. This is my first semester in computer science. Unpleasant. This is an equivalent of C grade average. This is my literal face after I looked at the grades. I've never experienced anything like it. Like, school was always easy for me, so I was just like, what the hell is happening? So then I looked, all rankings are lies, but this is one particular ranking talking about my school in 2010, the top 20-ish in the world in computer science. Means I had a lot of competition from a lot of intelligent people on these exams, like cool world best universities in computer science. Obviously, clear what I need to do. I need to study harder, right? I didn't study a lot. Let's be honest, I didn't study a lot. I was very used to succeeding without studying. So then I, went and borrowed a bunch of books from the library and discovered they were no longer my friends. So I sat in front of books and I looked at the concepts and I read the theorems and calculus or whatever, and I just felt a huge amount of anxiety and it just wasn't working. And so I decided that this really sucks, so instead I went partying. Now, this picture is here because it's a picture of a party, but also because at one point I watched all of the seasons of Sex and the City instead of studying for a math exam. This show is not that good. I really needed to do something else other than study, and this was the only thing available, so I watched it all. So this, I didn't know this term back then. I discovered this term much, much later. This is classic fixed mindset. The reason I couldn't stare at the book is because I felt like if I was smart enough, I wouldn't need to study, right? Because my whole life I was told that I was very smart. So I looked at the book and I felt like I don't understand it, and so it was very anxiety-provoking, and so I moved on and didn't study. So somehow, very logically, it was easier to go to exams completely unprepared than to study an extra few hours. It's makes no sense, but this is how it is. So the concept of growth mindset comes from Carol Dweck in the book called Mindset. Highly recommend it. If you read nothing else, if you want to read one book from the entire list, this is the book. Also give it to your kids. Very impactful. Seriously wish I had it when I was a kid. The problem with growth mindset is that it's kind of like DevOps. 10 years ago, no one knew what growth mindset is. And today, everybody thinks they know what growth mindset is. So I'm going to spend some time explaining what I think. Fixed mindset says you can learn new things, but you can't really change how intelligent you are. And then growth mindset says you can always substantially change how intelligent you are. So when I ask the question in the beginning, there's always people who say, I can't change my intelligence. And then when I come back to here, they're like, oh, I didn't really mean like that. I meant, I can't change my IQ or something. And so what I'm here to tell you is you can change your IQ 100% and any other measure of intelligence that you can think of, you really can. And believing that is going to potentially change your life. So mindset is not binary. It's not like fixed or growth. It's somewhere on a continuum. And I've been thinking about this for a long time now, and I'm still not completely growth mindset. And sometimes I see something that I completely experience a very fixed mindset experience. And then it doesn't only pertain to intelligence, it pertains to basically any ability. So like you could have a very open growth mindset in intelligence, but believe that your physical ability is completely inborn, or creative ability is completely inborn. So for instance, you could believe that to be a better baseball player, you need to practice, but to be an artist, you need to have been born an artist, right? So you can have different assortment of this. So speaking of art, this is me drawing. This is also me drawing. This is a book that says that anybody can learn to draw. If you're interested, you can read it. I read like literally 3 chapters. One day I'll continue. But yeah, every time we talk about art, there's a lot of people who say, oh, you're so very creative. I'm more technically oriented. I'm not creative. I'm like, computer science is literally creating things out of nothing. It's like, I don't know. That's what I think. So this is another book. I guess I'm talking about a lot of books that are very, very helpful. Anyway, this quote says, fortunately, most children learn to walk before they can be told how to. This book is about how basically cognitive learning is not end-all be-all. It's hard to explain in words how to do certain things, and sometimes it's even hurtful. So there was this very cute study. It's not in this book, but there was this very cute study that someone did with, I think, 4-year-old kids. They came in and they taught the kids how to make a paper airplane, and all the kids could make a paper airplane. And then they brought in written instructions, very detailed written instructions, and then they read the instructions to the kids that explain how to make a paper airplane, and no kids could make a paper, same kids, right? And then they went back to go like, okay, well, make it the way you made before, and many of the kids still could not make a paper airplane. So cognitive instruction can interfere with you learning things. It highly depends on the domain, so it's an interesting thing. We learn by copying people, and the best way to teach someone is to get them to do it and to demonstrate how to do it well and to give them feedback, not to over-explain a thing. And this is a mistake we make a lot in teaching. Anyway, so wait, hold on. This always begs the question, what about talent? Are you telling me, that talent doesn't exist? You know, what happens with that? Well, talent exists, and it only carries you so far. So there's a concept of 10,000-hour rule. It was popularized by Malcolm Gladwell in the book Outliers. And he says, like, if you invest 10,000 hours in something, you're going to be great at it. Unfortunately, he sort of didn't fully understand the research he was basing it on. So the research is actually coming from this guy, Anders Ericsson. And there is a book that came out much later that is Peak, The Secrets of New Science of Expertise. And so the thing that Gladwell missed is that 10,000 hours doesn't apply to every domain, and it doesn't apply to every type of practice. So the most important part of it is to gain expertise by practice, you need to engage in deliberate practice, which involves feedback and modification of effort in response to that feedback. So, as an example, if you're playing tennis on the weekends with your friends who are roughly at your level, you can play tennis for 10,000 hours and never improve your tennis performance. You will be at a particular performance, and you're roughly at that performance. You may be having fun, but you're not improving. To improve, You need to hire a coach who will give you feedback and will be like, okay, this particular stroke, you need to do this way a little bit better. And then you do 100 times of the same stroke, and then you improve your performance. This is deliberate practice. So you get better through deliberate practice, not just through practice alone. And then there's a separate concept of kind and wicked domains. So kind domains are those that have presence of immediate and accurate feedback, and wicked domains are those that don't. So one of the examples from this guy's studies is doctors. So not all doctors are created equal. So they studied radiologists compared to surgeons. And so radiologists diagnose cancer from scans. They usually do not know if the person actually ended up having cancer or not, right? They just they diagnose cancer, and then that scan goes away, and they never see the patient, and they never see the scan again, and they never get feedback. So radiologists actually get worse with years of practice. Surgeons, on the other hand, get immediate feedback on the things that they do. So whenever they make a mistake, they know they made a mistake, and surgeons actually get much better with years of practice. So humans are very, very good at learning kind domains and not very good at learning at wicked domains. So basically, whenever you're in a wicked domain, you need to rig the game to help you, right? You need to have the best feedback you can get, and immediacy is very important. So like the quicker you get the feedback, the better you learn from it. So your starting point matters, but effort and feedback are key. There's another cute study that someone did, and in Canada, most professional hockey players were born in, I believe, January. And so they're like, what is it about January that makes a good hockey player? Turns out that basically, I don't know exact dates, but the cutoff for school age in Canada is such that the January-born people are the oldest in their class, right? So when you're in first grade, you're the oldest person in the first grade if you're born in January. And in first grade, this matters. This makes you better runner, better jumper, a little bit stronger, a little bit more coordinated. So these people got basically told that they have talent for hockey, that they're good at hockey. So they got basically investment from their coaches to play hockey. So the majority of the professional players ended up those kids that were born in January. So it's kind of like talent is important, not just because you had sort of predetermined ability, but also because you get a ton of investment from people around you. But you can always improve through effort and feedback if you also have sort of inborn, like I'm 5'4", I'm probably not going to make a good basketball player. I could improve compared to myself, but probably not win over someone who's more like better positioned to play basketball. But if you're also positioned well endowed to play basketball and you get a lot of effort and feedback, then you end up being a pro. So again, fixed mindset is believing that your inborn abilities are predetermining your performance. Growth mindset is believing that it's about your effort and feedback. I personally think that assuming that you can't exceed your inborn abilities is just a highly limiting belief. It's kind of just sad, right? Like, oh, I was born this way, I could never be better than this. This is just like, I don't know, like sad to think about. So I think that as a human, you have a choice, and the choice is to suffer while constantly improving yourself or to enjoy while constantly improving yourself. And I know what I prefer in this equation, right? But like, I see this a lot, like all the know-it-alls, all the people who walk into the room and have to prove how smart they are, they perceive every situation as an exam, as a test of how good they are, and they can't afford to fail. So they have to like be anxious all the time about how they're doing. Unfortunately, our culture is not such, right? So the stories we tell ourselves have nothing to do with growth mindset, right? So we constantly tell ourselves we're lazy. We tell our children that they're lazy. We tell our employees that they're lazy, unmotivated, disorganized, whatever. All sorts of negative talk. Are you actually lazy? So these are pictures of cats. And cats can sleep up to 16 hours a day, and when they don't sleep, if they're well fed, they will lounge around and be pretty. Humans are not cats. This is a pandemic era joke. There was a very serious lawyer that showed up to a very serious court case and did not know how to remove a picture of an avatar of a cat from Zoom. So he kept arguing a very serious court case while saying, I am not a cat, I promise you I'm not a cat. So you are not a cat. To prove this, I will tell you, this is a test. You can go home, you can sit on your couch, and you can remove all devices, all distractions, and try to do nothing for 5 minutes. And I'm pretty sure you will fail and have an urge to get up and do something, maybe even something creative, really want to go and do something. So we're like this, we're motivated. Also, this is Dynaman. You're lazy, no, constantly stressing about all the things and putting off actually takes a lot of work. So this is Edward Deming. He says, people are born with intrinsic motivation, self-esteem, dignity, curiosity to learn, and joy in learning. We're inherently motivated. Kids are inherently very, very into learning, very into finding new things out, improving their performance. They will practice and try to be better at walking, at talking, at climbing, at whatever it is. They're also born with motivation to contribute to their family, to their community. Where does this all go? Why are we all so procrastinating, lazy, avoiding, not motivated, all that stuff? Where does it come from? So it comes from fear, in my opinion. So there's a lot of fear in our environment. Obviously, we fear failure. If you are a perfectionist, then obviously you fear failing, and sometimes failing means just being a little bit not perfect, which is a whole deal. But there's other things we fear too, and I think fear is largely the enemy of learning, because when you fear, your lizard brain kicks in, and your cognitive brain goes away, and you are very badly positioned to learn. And there's a particular kind of fear that I think is involved in a lot of this stuff, and that's threat to self. So if you perceive your self-worth to be something that's under threat at the moment, you have a hard time learning. This is Carl Rogers again. The educational system which most effectively promotes significant learning is one in which threat to self as a learner is reduced to a minimum. And unfortunately, the problem is we don't have such a system. The true challenge is the game is rigged against us. So our schools are very, very good at reinforcing fixed mindset. So we constantly grade and evaluate and classify students. We constantly put people in buckets and tell them they cannot exceed those abilities. We constantly tell people they're smart or not smart, they're well-behaved or not well-behaved. And even the threat of even the threat of the test itself can put you on the defensive and prevent you from learning, right? The best environment is when we're not graded, we're not evaluated all the time, especially we're not punished, right? So I don't like putting long words on slides, but this is a quote. A few modern philosophers assert that an individual intelligence is a fixed quantity, a quantity which cannot be increased. We must protest and react against this brutal pessimism. With practice, learning, and above all method, we manage to increase our attention, our memory, our judgment, and literally to become more intelligent than we were before. This quote surprisingly comes from a person who invented the IQ test. Because he invented the IQ test as a measure of progress, and he was actually working with underprivileged students, and he wanted to measure their progress and improvement in the intelligence sphere, and he wanted to give the IQ test repeatedly to show how much they improved with learning. And Instead, we use IQ tests to classify people and tell them that they can never exceed their buckets. There was this study is pretty famous, so maybe you have heard of it. The researchers came in at the beginning of the school year for little kids, I don't remember the age, and they told the teachers that these kids are very intelligent and talented, and these kids are not, right? So they randomly picked and separated kids into two buckets and told the teachers who was who, and at the end of the year, lo and behold, the kids who were in the intelligent bucket did really well, and the kids who were not did not. And this was completely random selection. It had nothing to do with actual measures. And the reason was because the teachers invested in the kids who were classified as smart and talented. This all becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy all the time. This comes from Carol Dweck herself. So she did study in kids, and so the study was rigged, obviously. She gave little kids easy puzzles that everyone could solve, and she gave them two types of praise, either smart praise or effort praise. So smart praise was, you're so smart, you're so intelligent, you solved this puzzle. And the effort praise was, you worked so hard on this, you solved these puzzles. So in the group of smart praise, the kids saw the harder, so then they gave the kids harder puzzles that no one could solve. And so in the smart praise group, the kids saw the hard problems as a failure. They didn't like solving the hard puzzles. They were not having fun. They performed worse later on subsequent puzzle performance, and they lied about their scores. They said they solved puzzles, they did not. In the effort praise, they did not see the failing at complicated puzzles as a failure. They applied more effort to solve them. They thought the hard problems were more fun, and they improved later at puzzle solving. So this was literally a sentence or two that people said to kids in the beginning of the study, and it affected their performance in such a major way. And think about how many times a day we tell people that they're smart, talented, whatever, whatever, how many times we tell ourselves these things, right? And how much this probably affects us. So research on praise says ability praise is not good. So ability, smart, talented, inborn, athletic, whatever, is bad for your performance in the long run. Effort praise is much better. Newer research actually says that the best type of thing is informational feedback and not praise at all. So the best thing for improving children or yourself performance is giving specific informational feedback and not saying, oh, you're so great at it, good job. But our hero stories erase all mention of effort. Effort is a bad thing. Sorry, I need a sip of water. So this is Dynamite again. I failed. It doesn't matter as long as you tried your best. Oh, I did not do that either. So in fixed mindset, effort is a bad thing. Like failure, it means you're not smart or talented. If you were, you wouldn't need effort. So this is me, right? The first time I read this sentence, I was like, why are you in my head? Because this was the problem. This is why I couldn't read the textbook, because I was like, well, if I was smart enough for this, I would read this page once, and I would immediately understand it and know how to solve all the calculus problems. And here I cannot do this, therefore I'm not smart enough. And one of my best friends, he read a book, and then he read another book, and then he went to talk to a teacher, and then he studied with a friend, and then he dug into this until he understood the concept, and I just was too fixed mindset to do that, and that was very self-handicapping. So self-handicapping is creating or reporting performance obstacles to provide excuses for failure that don't threaten self-worth. So basically people who are very in a fixed mindset, they do what I did and they don't study for the exam so they can have an excuse for failing, or they study for the exam, but they tell everybody they didn't study so they can have an excuse for failing. Because the idea of trying and still failing or leaving yourself without excuses is the worst fear in the fixed mindset. So this is like a major problem for you if you're trying to perform well, right? Because you're handicapping yourself from doing your best because you're afraid of effort. That's like so illogical. Yet I did this personally, and I know a lot of people who did that too, right? So again, your choice is suffer while proving yourself or enjoy while improving yourself. And I think one choice is much better. But I've been on stage here talking about humans, and the first version of this talk did not have anything about organizations. And consistently, I would have someone come up to me and say, you know, Sasha, this is cool. But as a very important managerial person, I don't care about personal learning experiences. I want my organization to perform well, and I want a learning organization, and like you're talking about personal humans. So let's talk about organizations then. So in the space of organizational learning, this is a famous study. I'm sure many people in the room saw some version of this. So Google did a research on effective teams. It was a huge study. They had 250 inputs, researched 200 teams, had tried 35 statistical models. Basically, they collected all of the data, and then it was a good study because they were okay with being surprised, right? So they didn't assume that something specific needs to come out, and they were indeed surprised by what was the biggest factor that affected the effective teams. And they, like, in the study, they had sales teams, so like as sort of objective performance results as you can, and they expected to be like, oh, the best average IQ, or like the best learning budget, or the best whatever, whatever. So the best predictor was psychological safety, which they define as teams' shared belief that it's okay to take risk, express ideas, concerns, and speak up with questions, and to admit mistakes. And it sounds familiar, right? It sounds surprisingly like growth mindset, because fear is the enemy of learning. So the less fear the people on the team experience in this environment, the better they learn, which also influence their performance in the organization and their results. So this is from Marsick and Watkins. They did a bunch of studies on organizational learning. They have a dimensions of learning organization questionnaire and stuff that it's all very interesting. I'm just going to quote one thing is, no organizational learning can take place without individual learning and learning from the developments in the environment. The organization has the power to encourage or discourage individual learning and to learn from or ignore developments in the environment. So basically, organizational learning means two things. Personal learning, right, because the humans in the organization have to be able to learn, and then the organization as a whole learning or not learning from the developments in the environment. So there's this concept of single and double loop learning. So if we're talking about learning from the environment, the single loop is I take actions, I have results match. So like I expected this and this happened, this is great, I continue doing the same action. Results mismatch, I expected this, this didn't happen, I changed my actions, right? This is a single loop learning. So all organizations are good at this, because if you're not good at this, you go broke, right? Like if you make too much of a product and no one buys it, you have to be able to make less of a product, that kind of thing. This is single loop learning is like a good metaphor for this is a stupid thermostat. So like I set it to 72. If it's hotter, it's going to make it colder. If it's colder, it's going to make it hotter, but it's never going to change the 72, right? So then we go to double loop learning, and that says we can reflect on the whole thing, and we can question our assumptions, right? So this is like a smart thermostat. It's going to decide that 72 may not be an ideal temperature, and it's going to update the 72 because whatever, it decided that we do better at 73 or 71. So majority of organizations are actually not good at the second part of it, and that's because to question assumptions, you usually need to question someone's job. You sometimes need to, like, move the whole department or question someone's job performance or do some things like that, and that most organizations are not good at. They're allergic to questioning assumptions. So our organizations are usually very invested in saving face, and like if you read about organizational performance, it comes up again and again, like you want to be able to be candid, and it's difficult. So CEO disease is the negative feedback vacuum, but you don't have to be a CEO to create a vacuum of, I don't want to listen to bad news around yourself. So this is from a guy called Chris Argyris. A paper on teaching smart people how to learn. It's pretty easy to find, and it's like 5 pages and recommended reading. One of the books I read called him an unsung hero of organizational psychology. So he says smart people don't learn because they have too much invested in proving what they know and avoiding being seen as not knowing. Sounds suspiciously like growth mindset. He did his research before Carol Dweck did. But I think if he did it after, they would all agree on terms. This in particular was actually a study about MBA students becoming consultants, and they were completely closed off to learning, specifically because they were so used to being good performers that they could not hear negative feedback. So anytime anybody would give them negative feedback on their performance, that would explain by circumstances, it would explain by anything but their own fault, right? And so the people who we expect the most to be able to learn sometimes are those who can learn the least, because the threat to their self-worth was a horrible enemy of learning. So Chris Argyris, again, has the concept of theory of action, and it's the way organizations select strategies to achieve objectives. Lots of big words on the slide, but it's actually not that horrible. So defensive reasoning is model 1, and it's organizations that are engaged in opinion-based objectives. They want to achieve, actually, let me go to the next slide. In one word, make sure that the collected data confirms the highest paid person opinion. That's model 1 for you. So basically, if I am the CEO and I say, you know what, if we painted our widgets green, we would sell more of them. I start with my personal opinion, and I'm the highest paid person in the room, so now I say, okay, well, we need to prove or disprove this, but I already said that this is my opinion, right, guys? So then people are very invested in proving that I'm right. So they're going to go and paint the widgets green and sell them, but they will be very invested in showing that we actually sold more widgets because they were green, right? So this is kind of shooting ourselves in the hip, but it's kind of hard to avoid because always there are people invested in their ideas and their opinions. So what's really the alternative is model 2, is productive reasoning. And again, I'll go to one sentence. It's creating a testable hypothesis and monitoring the implementation of it to prove or disprove it. Basically, the scientific method. So it's probably the only way to take the ego out of the equation, because instead of starting with someone's personal opinion, you start with a neutral hypothesis. So like, if we look at this, I don't know, this is hypothesis-driven development. For some reason, we have it in development, but not in other areas, but it applies to everything. So we believe that this capability will result in this outcome, and we will know we succeeded when we see this measurable signal. So we know what outcome we want. We create a hypothesis about which capability will lead to that outcome. And another important thing is we talk about the signal, right? How are we going to identify that we're succeeding or not? So now the green widgets are not Sasha's opinion, but they are a hypothesis. And now we're not necessarily invested in saving face and proving that the green widgets are successful, but we can actually say, no, we learned that green widgets suck, and we need to make them yellow. So actually, very successful organizations do that really well in development, right? This is why Google goes and tests 100 shades of a color of a button before they ship the button, and they ship like, to 1% of users this blue and to 1% of users that blue, and they just see which one you click more ads when they ship to you. But basically, we sometimes are very good about this in development, but not necessarily in other areas. But we can do this about everything, including how we structure our organizations. So, where can you start with all this? Oh, that was interesting. Okay. Where can you start with all this? So cognitive learning is important. And like, if you don't know the idea, you kind of can't implement an idea, right? That's like a little bit difficult. But I just like this slide. I put it in all my presentations. It's cute. If knowledge was all it took, we'd all have six-pack abs. Like, I know exactly what I need to do to have six-pack abs, yet I'm not doing it, right? And we all forget all the time that EQ skills require practice. I'll give you an example. I very much want to be good at active listening, and I've read a lot about active listening, and I suck at it because it's not enough to read a book about something, right? So we need to find opportunities to practice being more growth mindset oriented. And how we do this, potentially one of the things, is embracing mistakes, right? So you can never be immediately good at something, right? All learning requires vulnerability and making mistakes. And even if you happen to be immediately good at something, you will always reach the level of performance at which you're no longer good, right? So you can have that vulnerability and openness to making mistakes, and you can embrace it, and that will start your journey towards growth mindset. If you are able to create psychological safety around you. So if you're a team lead, make it safe to take risks, to express ideas, to admit to mistakes. Admitting to mistakes is a very good, very big thing. This is all like blameless postmortems and stuff like that, right? We have found in many, many ways that admitting to mistakes is a huge predictor of performance of teams. But it doesn't only apply to teams. Make it safe in your family. Make it safe for your kids. And it doesn't only apply to communities, because make it safe for yourself. One of the biggest culprits here is your inner voice. So that guy that tells you you're not good enough, find a way to make them your friend, and find a way to make it safe for yourself to make mistakes and to be not perfect at things. This is a plug because, we all talk about AI all the time today, so I have much more rants on this. But to summarize my thoughts on AI is all systems are socio-technical. We can never fully replace humans. And humans are always a big contributor to how we're doing it as an organization, how we're doing it in technology. You're probably familiar with the concept of flow. So, the enjoyment appears at the boundary between boredom and anxiety when the challenges are matched with the person's capability to act. In other words, you have to be just challenged enough, but not too much. And, anxiety and boredom are both not your friends. Unfortunately, Gen AI often switches our role from creator to curator. So you used to write code, and now you have to evaluate if the code is good, which induces both boredom and anxiety, which kind of sucks for our performance. So ideally, I hope that Gen AI becomes this calculator, becomes this tool that we can use to kind of become better at our own things and become better creators as humans, and not replace us, because I don't think we're there yet, fortunately for everybody. So Cliff Notes, if you listen to the first slide and then got distracted by an email, I will summarize the talk for you. All learning requires vulnerability. That's important. And again, making mistakes. Again, cliches are true, but maybe you're ready to embrace them. Fear is the enemy of learning. Whenever you fear punishment, evaluation, tests, what people will think of you, you're not open to learning. Threat to self is the enemy of learning, and potentially one of the biggest ones, because the way we perceive ourselves and the way others perceive us is incredibly important to us. And your choices are You can have a fixed mindset and suffer while proving yourself at every opportunity, or you can have a growth mindset and enjoy improving yourself at everything that matters to you. And this all applies to organizations as much as it applies to individuals. And my slides are here, some version of them anyway, and the link to resources that went into the talk.